Welcome to the Precision Teaching Podcast. My name is Rick Cabina, and I am joined by my trusty sidekick, Doug Kostowitz.
That would be me.
Well, it is 2010. We have a bright year ahead of us, and I am as excited as I could possibly be.
Yeah, you know what? This year is looking on the up and up. I have to say that I, too, am excited for the new year.
Yeah, we're in something. We can say we're in the tens.
Yeah, we are. We're not in the aughts anymore.
No, we're not. Hey, I just rhymed. That was pretty pathetic, but we have to entertain ourselves.
Yes, we do.
We have, so we put 2009 behind us, and I was looking at my podcast files, and I actually started this in 2007, so technically we have a number of years we've been going, but last year was the best year by far because we had, just in terms of frequency, we had so many. This year, hope to have a full 12 podcasts. Maybe sometimes we'll have more on special occasions. We'll see how that works out. A lot of great interviews with lots of precision teachers, but this year we're going to probably expand our list of who we interview with maybe some people who are outside of precision teaching but still relevant and interesting to our profession. Some psychology professors, maybe some other people in behavior analysis, and maybe even some other scientists who would be interesting to our audience.
That sounds exciting, but I do have a comment on something you said earlier. Did
Yes?
this podcast really start before I started working with you? That's the question I want to know.
What do you mean?
My point was, maybe this podcast, we'll just go back until it was you and me, so maybe it really wasn't going on before then. Those were just trial runs. I'm just joking.
It could be.
Again, we're looking to entertain ourselves.
Yeah. Well, let's get into our email question.
Okay.
We do have an email question, and the email
We always
question...
like to have email questions.
Yes, we do. It is, can you do precision teaching with anything, like whole language or facilitated communication? This is a very interesting question. Can you do PT with things like whole language or facilitated communication? The answer, the short answer, would be you can do precision teaching with just about anything. If you can count something and if you have a behavior that you can measure, you can do precision teaching with it. So that's the short answer. And let's see. I don't know. Do we want to go into the long answer? I guess the long answer is you could do it with almost anything, but there are some things it probably wouldn't be very useful to do it with. Whole language is, in fact, there have been conferences before that I have attended, precision teaching conferences, where people have indeed did precision teaching with whole language. And in that instance, hey, if you're using it to help kids learn more, then it's great. And I say, if you're going to do something that has certain, how do I put this, certain aspects of it that are questionable, if you're using precision teaching, then great. That's likely going to tell you where students are maybe could use a little more help. But when you pick things like facilitated communication, which is a flat out pseudoscience, that's just another question. I don't know that you would derive much value from using PT with something like facilitated communication.
I want to say, and correct me if I'm wrong, and you, I think, told me this, or I read it, did not Og say that in naming precision teaching, and I think this is maybe closer to where the question originates from, did he not say that it would be a little bit more descriptive to say it's precision measurement rather than using the term precision teaching?
Yeah, he said you could put precision behind anything, and If you're using it in nursing, it becomes precision nursing. If you're using it in whatever.
And so the idea here, as you mentioned earlier, and maybe I'm just reiterating things, but if you can, the idea is counting in time and then charting and then making decisions off of those charts. Now, there are some specific practice methods that you can do in relation to the chart, but the idea is you're making database decisions with whatever it is you can measure. In that measurement occurs in an amount of time.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I think the short answer and the long answer both ended with yes, unless you're doing something that, as you mentioned, is not really a science.
Yeah.
Or
now that I think about it, maybe that should be amended a little bit, because what if you were using precision? Like, what if someone was doing facilitated communication and they wanted to know, is my method helping my student communicate more? I mean, I suppose in some instances it could be set up for, let's say the question was this: I use facilitated communication, then I'm testing the person without facilitation. In that instance, it would be like, okay, I'm doing this thing, does it have this effect? But if it's truly facilitated communication, you're not measuring, you're measuring someone who is actually doing it. You're not measuring the student's independent responses, you're measuring the responses of the facilitator. And in that instance, the precision teaching wouldn't really be telling you anything. So I suppose maybe in some very constrained ways of using even a pseudoscience, if you had your condition that wasn't, that was actually legitimate, then maybe PT would help you there.
I think it comes back to exactly what you said with regards to measurement. If you can count something, now it doesn't, by putting something on the chart, doesn't validate what you are counting, but you are counting something. So you can count it and measure something, but then it's going to come back to, what are you measuring?
Mm-hmm.
What exactly is your pinpoint behavior that you're looking at? It probably in that case is the facilitator's behavior, not the student's behavior.
Yeah, let's say you're counting discrete communications.
Right.
I was just giving that to you. Go with it, Doug.
Oh, discrete communications in a facilitated communication format, you mean?
Yes.
Well, are you doing it in some type of experimental reversal? So you're doing it with the facilitator and then without the facilitator? Or you're doing it in...
That's actually if you're doing that, you're slapping a research design on it.
Well, that's what I was asking.
Yeah.
If you're just measuring, then you're counting number of times touching the communication board or number of words that are produced out of the communication board, whatever that pinpoint is.
Mm-hmm.
But it's still, once you distill it down, you're probably measuring, you're measuring the behavior of the facilitator in how many words that are produced per minute.
Yeah. Well, however you do it, whatever you call that, if it's
mm-hmm.
not the actual person doing it, the point is, as you said, the data that's being generated isn't telling you what you think it's telling you. It should probably be, that movement cycle should be really clearly defined so people can understand what that data is saying. Well, at any rate, I thought that was a pretty interesting question. And
yes.
You can... I remember once I interviewed Ogden Lindsley, and I asked him, I said, can you tell me any time that precision teaching hasn't worked? And his response was, well, if precision teaching is defined as measuring behavior and making decisions based on the standard acceleration charted behavior, precision teaching has never failed. And I thought, yeah, that's right, because as a system that is providing you feedback and directing you, if you do something with that information, it's served its function. If you make a decision and you say, okay, let's continue with this intervention, or if you make a decision and say, oh, this intervention's fine, let's keep on going, you're using precision teaching. It's not, it doesn't have to produce, it's not like a research design, or it's not like something that if you do it, you're going to get something from it. It's a process that allows you to make decisions, and once you've made those decisions, then precision teaching has worked.
So I'm gonna ask you a question, and I think I know where I'm gonna go with it, but I'll see where you want to go. You can use the standard acceleration chart by itself just to display data. Yes. But as soon as and there's sometimes where, like for example, amount of rainfall, you can't really make any decisions on that with regards to the rainfall, but you still can plot that data.
Well, you can evaluate it.
You can evaluate it. So I'll ask you, is that precision teaching, or is that just using the standard acceleration chart as a data collection and data display tool?
I would break it down, and when you talk about precision teaching, we have very specific rules, and we use it. But you could just talk about standard acceleration charting, which I do.
Right.
For example, the listserv is precision teaching and standard acceleration charting.
Right.
And so that's not necessarily precision teaching. You're right. You could standard acceleration chart anything. Well, time series data.
Mm-hmm.
I should say. You're not going to be standard acceleration charting things that belong on a pie chart.
Right.
Because that's why we have pie charts.
Exactly. So I was just that's where I was going to go, but I just wanted to take that as a step further, so that even though you may just use the standard acceleration chart, that isn't necessarily precision teaching.
That's right. That's absolutely right. Okay, good question. Let's move on to our science news. Yeah, we need some kind of music going into science. I have some music that goes into the podcast, but I don't have little cutesy things that go back and forth for each one of these, so we'll have to go with your crude, what do we call it? Your crude introduction. Transition.
We need little sound buttons. That would be really neat.
Yeah, like they have on the radio. Dingo and the baby. In the morning. Dingo. Woof, woof. Yeah.
Or science news. It's now time for science news.
Yeah. We'd lose our 5 listeners if we started doing that.
Exactly.
Okay, where were we at? Oh, we're talking about the science news.
Yes.
So we have a study that was just recently reported, and I like to pick up on some of the science stories that make the media. And when you take these, I don't know how the media folks look at these stories and decide what's newsworthy and what's not, but this was one of them that made the news cycle. And it's a piece that talks about teachers who have anxiety about math affect the girls in their classroom. And it's a real clever title here, at least in the One Science News. Teacher anxieties may subtract from girls' math scores. Yeah, very funny. Of course, the actual article it's in press. It's females teachers' math anxieties affects girls' math achievement. And what this study did is it worked with a sample of teachers and kids, and it looked at, these are first and second grade students, it looked at figuring out which female teachers, because teaching is 90% of LED teachers are female, so you have more female teachers than male teachers. So they were looking at these female teachers, and they measured anxiety. And what they did is they said, okay, these female teachers that have math anxiety, how does it affect these the girls in the class? And what they found is that there was an effect, that teachers that displayed anxiety through comments or however they were displaying this anxiety the children at the end of the year had lower scores on standardized tests in math than those who didn't have this. And that's breaking this down into a nutshell. And when you look at that, that's a pretty, whether this is a small study, so it will certainly have to be replicated, but that's a pretty interesting finding, I think, for looking at something, the effects of what a teacher says and does in regards to how kids, especially little girls, will perceive their skill and ability with something like math. And of course, you can imagine if, let's say, you score at a low percentile, then as you go up through the curricula, could really damage the opportunity and the chances and someone's ability to do math just from something as simple as displaying your anxiety about math.
Yeah. The teachers have so many effects on kids, just not on students, both male and females, and just
Sure.
Not just simply can I provide efficient, effective instruction to them, but just showing they're nervous about math is eye-opening, and some of the things that I'm doing has other effects behaviorally that the teacher imparts and how they interact with kids. But just showing something simple as, well, I really don't like math, I'm scared of math, and it spills over to the girls more than the boys. And it's frustrating. Now, their suggestion for this initially, based on, of course, preliminary data, is just providing additional math tutoring and coaching. But what could you do about that?
Well,
because I'm sure that these girls perpetuating the anxiety about math that probably were in that situation how many years ago with a teacher who probably said was nervous about math. It's almost like a perpetual cycle here.
Yeah. Our society doesn't do a great job in general in teaching people math. Oh, I shouldn't say society. I should say our educational system. Mm-hmm. And certainly, if you look at statistics and you look at who goes into science and engineering and math fields, you do see more of a predominance of males than females. And across time, there's been all types of different initiatives that they've looked at, and there's lots of reasons why those numbers are what they are. But if you really want to address the problem, we should be looking at having people that teach math more competent. Otherwise, what would really be nice is if everyone was more competent with math, but that's a pretty long-term solution, and who knows if that'll ever happen with math. But there are other countries that, when you look at countries that do well in math, and you look at the people that they hire and the teachers, it's very different. Some people are hiring people that are really, really good in math, and if you think about who are we hiring to teach math, and I'm not denigrating all teachers that teach math, but certainly we're not hiring people that were necessarily trained in math. We're hiring more of generalists, and how far do their math skills go?
Yeah.
Well, that's an open question.
Yeah, it's not an easy fix, because I think the education, especially at the elementary levels, not so much as the secondary, because you can get specialty areas for mathematics, history, and so on and so forth. But at the elementary levels, I've come across teachers in the training process that are not very good at math, and you end up teaching how to do math as well as how to teach math.
Right.
So there are gaps, and it's nothing else. It's made me stop and think a little bit more about what can you do, and what are the effects of teachers, not just limiting at the instructional level, but these other tertiary things that are going on have great effects on performance.
Yeah. Well, this study is an eye-opener, and let's hope that some folks who are in the LED field look at this and maybe, if they don't figure out how to address this problem, at least talk to teachers and let them know, hey, look, if you display these kinds of behaviors, here's the effects it's having on kids. And even though it's unintentional, and you could have a teacher unintentionally say to another teacher, oh, I hate math, or oh, I can't balance my checkbook, or whatever. That has an incredibly negative effect, or could have an incredibly negative effect, I should say. So even simple things like that, the moral of this story is to be very guarded, and probably, if we want to be positive about this, is say good things about math, and also have teachers reinforcing and giving praise for kids' effort when they're trying to do math problems and they're trying to work their way through it. And that would be something positive that could be done, whether people are anxious about it or not.
Now, what's not in this article that definitely I would like to know is what type of math curriculum were they using? Because I would hypothesize, and I'm probably never going to run the study, but that certain types of curriculum may breed certain anxieties about math at the teacher level as well as at the student level, and that certain curriculum are tied to really differing performance in math for kids.
You may be right, but you know what? If you suck at math, it doesn't matter what curriculum they give you. You're going to be nervous.
That's true. That's true.
Some just make it more frustrating, because if you're bad at math and then you have a curriculum that's difficult to figure out, then you're just a frustrated teacher.
Exactly. So.
Okay. Let's move on and talk about an article review. This article review is one of the things that I like to do is share. I like to go through the Journal of Precision Teaching and look at studies from the early part of when the journal was just came out. And we talked about a chart share before, and this is another chart share. And this chart share is from 1981, so the journal was still relatively new here. And this is a pretty interesting article. It's a short little chart share, but it's entitled "Why We Should Have Used the Standard Behavior Chart in Acceleration, a Case Study." Of course, before we called it the Standard Acceleration Chart, it was called the Standard Behavior Chart.
Mm-hmm.
And this nice little chart share shows how these folks, basically, when they had their data on an add-subtract graph, how they missed a trend.
Mm-hmm.
And had they been using acceleration measures on the standard acceleration chart, they would have been able to see the pattern.
Yeah, I always like it, and I know that you've done it with some articles that have said some things, but when you put the data on the standard acceleration chart, you make different decisions sometimes, and in this case, they missed an acceleration where they decided to make a change, and even they stated if they would have had it on the standard acceleration chart, they wouldn't have missed the behavior and they wouldn't have made the change, if I'm correct.
Yeah, I guess we should say what the behavior is. This is a 31-year-old male, and he had very little intelligible vocalizations, as is described in the article. And these parents and the therapists were trying to help this person have more of a frequency and variety of different types of requests that were made. And that was the behavior that they were focusing on.
Right. And they were, the individual was highly variable at the beginning, but then in this third condition, and it's nice because they've pulled out the graph of what it looks like on the add subtract graph.
Yeah, I like that. They superimpose it on the chart. It's
actually on the chart, and they show in comparison how the data is a clear acceleration, and then at the change, it decelerates back to practically no growth. And they looked back and said, wow, we had something there. And it took the parents at home telling the therapist that, hey, he's making progress. And so the original data didn't show that, and it did here. And I know that you've done it, and I would like to do it more often, but it does. The data does look different on the standard acceleration chart, facilitating different decisions.
Mm-hmm. One thing that Clay Starlin has said to me on multiple occasions, which always strikes me when I think about it, is that there's a correspondence between change on the chart and our perceptions and our ability to perceive those changes. And when there's something like a times 1.4, if you are, and think about that behavior, whatever the behavior is, if you're used to a standard acceleration chart, a 1.4 is a pretty good clip of behavior change. You're going to pick up on that. If this is, in this instance, this is someone making more requests, that's a pretty healthy acceleration versus the next phase is times 1.1. Look, if you're at times 1, ain't nothing happening, right?
Yep.
It's just staying the same. In times 1.1, that's just a really minor amount of change. So you may see something, but it's really not much. But 1.4, you'd notice that. And that's exactly what is said in this article, that these parents are like, hey, something's going on. And if you look at the behavior on the equal interval chart, it just doesn't look that impressive.
No, it doesn't. It looks like a slight, and the numbers are 4 to 7. Well, actually, low is a 2, but when you put it on a standard acceleration chart, the lows, so it's showing that it's highly variable, but there is that very noticeable acceleration.
We need more people taking data and putting it on the chart and saying, okay, what does it look like when we look at it here and we look at it there?
Mm-hmm.
We really do. We need that as a field. And it's always refreshing. I mean, this came back from 1981, but it's, even though it's old, it's you can see as they wrote this article up that they're saying, look, this thing happened to us. Don't let it happen to you. Don't let it happen to other people. Let's use this tool for visual analysis, and let's let it help people.
Mm-hmm. And it's also not a very long article. It's about a page long. So.
Yeah. So you were able to follow along, in other words?
What'd you say?
I said you were able to follow along, in other words?
Because it was so short?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although there weren't pictures. Well, I guess the chart's a picture.
Yeah, the chart is a fantastic picture.
Yeah.
Picture's worth 1,000 words, so it's actually probably a 4-page if you include the extra 1,000 words.
And it's not double-spaced, but single-spaced. Yeah, this was I noticed this was done at North Texas State University too, and I always wonder where these people are influenced and who they're influenced from. North Texas State is a wonderful program in terms of behavior analysis, and they have been for years. So I wonder who was around there at the time that maybe helped them out with this. Bottom line is this. Chart more data, people. That's it. Chart more data. And of course, by saying chart, I mean standard celebration chart.
Yes. I have a question for you.
Okay.
And a little aside. Because there's an extra page on here, it goes into the next thing. Did they put performance and learning world records?
Yeah, they used to do that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, there's a performance record of C-Think of 1,470 words per minute silent reading, and C-Write 146 subtract facts of 18 per minute.
Yeah, that alone right there is a crazy number, because if you've ever done subtraction facts, if those are subtraction facts, let's say they're the normal ones, 0 to 9 fact answers, you're writing single-digit answers. And just to be able to write 146 single-digit, oh man, that's, think about it. In 60 seconds, you are answering more than 2 problems per second. I've done this before, and I could probably. When's the last time I did it? I know I could get up in the 60s, but 146. You're right. That's just crazy. Here's another one. Say 10 survival words over and over for 1 minute. Corrects times 20 and incorrects divide by 15 for 8 days of data. That's a pretty impressive acceleration rate. Times 20.
And a divide by 15.
That is like screaming up and screaming down. And I
think that would be interesting to see just those points, and to know that there were people, and there are people now that can do similar things.
But these are world records that we're talking about here.
Mm-hmm.
And it is interesting when you think about human performance. We have a continuum, and the world performance, or the learning world records, we're on the far right-hand side of the bell curve. So it's interesting to think about it. Yeah, 1,500 words per minute silent reading. What does that equal per second? So what would that be?
What is that?
It's like
50, so 6 into 147. That's over 20.
Wow.
Yeah, it's
20 words per second. Silent reading
20,
is still.
That's 27 words a second.
Almost 30 words per second?
Yeah, almost 30 words a second. 1,800 would be 30 words a second, so it's about 27.
Yeah. Oh, I wish I had that ability. But that's okay. Well, Doug, guess what? We're at the end of our podcast. We don't have an interview tonight. We're starting off the new year talking to our wonderful audience, and we will have an interview next month. We have a few people lined up, and we'll see which one we'll put in first, and we'll keep on working and have some other interviews as we move forward. But that's it for today. Any other comments?
I want to call out to everyone. Continue to send us questions, and if you come across an interesting article or some interesting science news, please send it on to us. We'll talk about it, and it'll promote you at least to listen to one, the next one that we talk about. So,
good call, Doug.
That's it. I'm here for the good calls.
Well, on behalf of Doug Koslowitz, I'm Rick Cabina, and thank you for joining us on the Precision Teaching Podcast.